Happy New Year, everyone. It's 2023, January, and Ari and I are gathering together again to continue on in our journey with Uranus through the houses and signs. We took a little break in December, and we have reached Uranus in Aquarius, or the 11th house, which is really a double signature in a sense, right? To have Uranus in the 11th makes it extra energized with that archetype, and Uranus in Aquarius as well. Although, because Uranus moves so slowly, a lot of souls will have Uranus in Aquarius at certain points in time. And so, Ari, Happy New Year to you. It's good to gather again. And what I love about Uranus and the 11th house and Aquarius is community. I love the feeling of community. I love to gather together with friends like you, Ari, and talk about what we both love. The like-minded interests that we both share. It just creates a special connection. It creates a unique connection, and it allows us all to feel more well connected. There's that word again. We feel more a part of something, and even if it's very different than what another group is doing, it does create a sense of security, even though we might feel very different than another group of people. So I do think that as you gather together with friends of like mind or in a community, it makes you feel also like perhaps you're home. It's like your family. It can be like your family if you have been raised in a family where maybe your parents were divorced, or there was a lot of trauma perhaps, but you really found friendships and family within a community. It can be so nurturing. And it can be exactly what it is that your soul was seeking. And I hear so often, Ari, from people, I'm still looking for my people. I'm looking for my tribe. And if you've been part of a small tribe or part of an underdog population or a subset of a population that's very unique to that culture, and now you find yourself in this big world, and I'm meaning in past lives, this might have been true. It can be hard to be thrown back into this massive mix of people and find your people from another time. So maybe it's because on a soul level, you are meant to be on your own. Uranus in the 11th house can create this feeling of being kind of separate from the rest of the world, on the outside looking in, totally alone or misunderstood, like an alien in this world. It can also create that sense. So maybe you're like a lot of people all over the world that are also feeling that way. And this may be a lifetime where you're not able to come back with all of your tribe or all of your people. But it's important really with this signature to continue to express that individuality, even if you are a group of one at times, even if you really feel like you're a group of one, which can happen very much so with this archetype. And I really do feel that Aquarian archetype across the board, though, so often can mean my friends or my family, my friends. I feel so at home with these people or this group of people. So it is important to find others that think like you, to make you feel more a part of something bigger, like we do in the evolutionary astrology community. Whenever we connect, it feels like coming home for me, at least. And so I know, Ari, when I first met you, I'm like, I feel like I knew you a long time ago, right? And there's a lot of others. Like every time I see you, it's just like, oh, I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah.
And there's many others I feel that way about in this community that we've created, or not we've created, but that has been created for us to all be a part of.
I'm so glad you started with that. just thinking about the difference between natural resonance and just the harmonics of life. People come together according to vibration. The difference between that and family, and really the Uranus 11th house archetype is almost more essential to the nature of creation, to the nature of reality, because we can come into a lifetime where suddenly some person now is like your father or your daughter, but in some other lifetime, they were your best friend at the monastery.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of like the Cancer Capricorn dimension of reality, there are these forms and familial manifestations that happen. But Uranus speaks to the individuality of the soul. And it's really more about vibration. So we're looking kind of beyond the forms. We're looking beyond the particular constructs and identities and all that happen in this physical world experience. And we're just connecting with the nature of the soul itself. And so, we can find ourselves resonating. It's like those images I love looking at where you'll see a dog and a chicken cuddling together.
Oh,
It's just like there
yeah.
are ways of being, and I mean, it could be a human and a chicken. This is the point. There's
Yeah.
no division here in terms of how all of creation resonates with all of itself. And you spoke about, we find our tribe, we find our people, and there's a sense of belonging. And we can have this dichotomy in the 11th house, Aquarius, where we can either feel like we're a part of a group. I resonate with these people. We all share, me and Kristin get together every month and we talk about one of 12 things. And we've been doing that for several years. We have a shared vibratory resonance with something. And then there could also be the astro enthusiast who is alone. They don't know who to talk to. They're really interested in astrology or in spirituality, but relative to their own evolutionary needs, there may not be any context for their unique vibration. And this is a very, very common experience, let's say, in the beginning of the individuated stages, right? You have the world you know. And so this Uranus and 11th house Aquarius archetype, in some way for all of us, is always pointing to the threshold between the known and the unknown, where we belong, where we're a part of something, but then at the same time, and this will be experienced at different levels of intensity at different stages, or depending on our unique needs. At the same time, we'll also point to where there is no context, there's no ground, there's nothing we can hold on to relative to where we fit in. And I think the truth of that, even if we are a part of a community and we feel deep resonance, even then, there's a deeper existential truth to, you can't find, because it's like, oh, I belong because we both share the same. If we talk long enough, we're going to find our differences, and everyone's going to find our differences. And any group that, whether it's a diet or a perspective or a way of life or a philosophical or political view, if you really get down to it, we're going to find such a diversity in that group that will at some point require the individuals to reconcile between who I am and where I feel the pressure to conform. So one of the deepest fears within the 11th Aquarius archetype is being myself, like the ramifications of being myself. So embedded in this archetype, it's oftentimes the subconscious memory. We don't remember these things consciously, of being different, being othered, being outcast, being excluded, being excommunicated, or doing that to others. And the question becomes, do I fit in? Am I going to be myself? Will I, and Jeff Green talked about the 3 general impulses to the Uranus archetype. If anyone wants to review this, we spoke about this during our Uranus intro class to this series. We can suppress because we don't want to be different. We can make some small changes, or we can just totally go for it. And to totally go for it really means having our ground in the unknown. And it squares that Taurus second house archetype. It's incredibly insecure in that way. Am I going to be safe? And 8th house Scorpio, am I going to be abandoned, betrayed? Am I going to lose all of my friends? So those are some of the core dynamics that manifest in the 11th house. Oh, you just muted. Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were speaking of vibration, our energy. So when we are suppressing a part of what's natural inside of us, when we are suppressing our natures, what comes out of us, our energy, our vibration, is not whole, right? It's a version of yourself. I was thinking of that expression, being the best version of yourself, but we really want to be all of ourselves. We want to be whole selves. And so a lot of times what will happen when you're living in a patriarchal world, or you're living in a a world where you've in lifetimes maybe denied parts of yourselves, and how your signal is emitted and what you are expressing, how people receive you may not be totally accurate. So if there's static on your signal and it's not clear about who you are, it could also affect where, what kind of groups you end up in. And absolutely, if this occurs, if you are repressing parts of your nature and you find yourself in a group of where you're interested in what's happening, people may not be responding to you, right? Because there's all these kind of sort of kinks in your energy field. They don't really know who you are. And so I want to give you an example. When Uranus is retrograde in any sign, it carries the Uranian archetype. It make any retrograde function has a Uranian response to it, or it energizes that. And so what happens during a Uranus retrograde, oftentimes people's vibration will be, this is a hard word, but repelling or canceling out or something. And it's intentional for your soul, which just means that I know I'm thinking of somebody, for example, who has a lot of Libran energy. She feels a need to be needed, a need to be liked. I need to be part of the group. And her whole sense of identity and sense of emotional security is attached to being part of the group and being like that. She never has been growing up, like, not invited to the sleepover or, whatever else it was. And so, we've talked about the fact that you chose this retrograde planet. So, you will probably always feel a little disconnected from the group because of overly attaching to people outside of yourself, to relationships, in order to feel okay about yourself. Now you're being forced back onto yourself in such a Taurian way, really to cultivate who you are in total, independent of who's in your life. It's a hard one. Boy, those are hard ones for people that have depended on others to feel good. And so that's a big part of the evolutionary journey that can be challenging. I mean, if you look at the 11th house, it's in conjunct the 4th. It's in conjunct Cancer, right? So that will that will force more of those emotional lessons for that soul. Absolutely. So if you may be listening to this and you don't have Uranus in the 11th or Uranus in Aquarius, but you do have Uranus retrograde, some of what I'm saying might resonate. I think too, it could be just like going to a party and feeling like there's all these people here, but I feel totally alone.
Right.
And maybe it's not always that way, but it can be.
Right. And one of the liberatory qualities of Uranus and the 11th house archetype in particular is not having an answer for what's going to happen next. We can be so the intense future focus that happens for us humans is often the result of trying to control, trying to put everything into a box, so we can be consistent with what we know. And there's something so possibly exhilarating, but also possibly terrifying in realizing most of why I am suppressing my own vibration is because I have a story in my mind about what will happen. And it's all projection. And I think really getting to identify and notice the truth of projection is powerful, because really we're just going to notice that we're actually just taking a story based on how we've internalized past experience. And if we even analyze past experience, we'd even question our perception of that. And we're putting it onto the future. And so I often think of the 11th house Aquarius archetype as, you mentioned like the radial dial. There's like a turn of the frequency. And when we turn the radial dial to a completely new frequency, it's like we shift from the frequency of thought, projection, anxiety, to clear seeing. And the clear seeing isn't saying what things are or what things should be, or it isn't even saying I belong or I don't belong. I think on the deepest level, the teaching here is that all of creation, which reflects the intelligence of creator and the intelligent design of our creator, harmonizes and resonates with all of itself in a brilliant way that is beyond our own human capacity at this moment to understand. Like the intelligence of it is so profound that all we can do is look through our inner and outer telescope and notice what's happening and begin to study and observe and correlate, like the brilliance of astrology. But the algorithm itself is already set, and its brilliance exists prior to our understanding of it. And so there's a resonance that happens and comes together on its own, and we will come into community, we will form friendships, we will resonate with other people naturally in the way that we're meant to. It's kind of like there are solar systems out there, and we're all the stars are connected. Everything's a part of some sort of greater ecosystem, micro and macro cosmos. And the liberating from the seeming I don't know where I belong and the seeming I know where I belong, and realizing neither has inherently more value than the other, because it's really about, at the end, it's really about liberating our own minds. You know, while you're talking, I had this thought, just this sense of where there can be a sudden break, like we're in a reality, we're playing a certain game, and we realize nothing that I'm doing here, nothing that I'm thinking is actually true. And I just thought of Eckhart Tolle. He's an Aquarius soul. He's, I would say, second stage spiritual, in my assessment. And he had an awakening experience early in this life where he, you know, was suicidal. And he had this feeling of, I don't want to live. And he had this moment of separation where he realized, I don't want to live implied an object and a subject. And he realized he was projecting identity onto this idea of self that he didn't like, but he wasn't that self. And he just kind of, he had just an immediate awakening experience. Byron Katie, who has a lot of Aquarius in her chart, also had a similar experience. And we could have these sudden moments with Aquarius. And I just looked, Eckhart Tolle's sun in Aquarius squares his nodal axis in Scorpio Taurus. We could have these sudden experiences where we just take a complete break from, I was living this world, thinking these thoughts, believing these things. And you mentioned the inconjunct to Cancer, also the semi-sextile to Capricorn. I have to fit into these constructs. I'm going to be shamed. I'm going to be judged. People are going to criticize me. It's not right. It's not okay to want these things or to be these things or to be what I am. I have to fit into these boxes. And it could be just a moment of realizing, oh, no, I don't. None of that is who I am. Sometimes on the soul's journey, it's sort of like we're building up for the moment where these shifts will just happen, right? It's almost like the bamboo growing underneath and we don't really see it, but consciousness is preparing itself for liberation. Oftentimes at these profound crisis moments where it feels kind of like things aren't flowing, like the dark side of the 11th house can be a total dissociation, going along with a very boring and blah kind of life. You got your country club and the church you go to and the people you eat dinner with. It just feels so uninteresting. It's just not you, right? And you're just playing the game. Or it can be a total anxiety or paranoia. People are out to get me. But there can be these momentary shifts where we just, in our own soul timing, realize, oh, this is not who I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And with Eckhart, it took him being in that extreme environment where he feel this was not who I am, right? That depression that comes with it when you're a living lie, perhaps, or how many times do I have to do this? Perhaps, like, what's the meaning in what I'm doing anymore? And it can create, and for him, I believe wasn't he a professor in somewhere in England at a university when this happened?
He was definitely in the academic world. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it'd be fascinating. So does he have Uranus in Leo or Aquarius? It's squaring the nodes.
Good question. He has Uranus. Okay, no, his sun is in
His sun squares the nodes.
Yeah, and his Uranus is in Gemini.
Oh, Uranus is in Gemini, but it would
opposite Jupiter, actually.
That would be interesting to find out the day that he has that breakthrough, right? And he sits on it.
Thinking that too, actually.
Yeah, another time. But maybe for our next show, you can bring that up. Okay.
Yeah, or if anyone in the comments wants to just look and post it for us, that'll be fun.
Yeah, that would be so cool. because this is timing, evolutionary timing that we talk about. These transits are just keys, really, that help us walk through a door. And when it comes to Uranus, it's usually this, in his case, and in a case we're going to talk about soon here, a shocking or sudden or life-changing moment that a soul might have to experience for whatever personal reason they do.
I want to say something to that. The sudden awakenings, these are planted in the soul program, and the identity construct can't predict these things because it's obviously beyond the bounds of our identity. But sometimes this is a part of and I'm thinking about another example that I'd be very curious to look at, the story of Mari Lasaya, Sri Yukteswar's guru. I remember reading about it where, he was living a householder life and climbed a mountain, met Babaji, and had an but it's like, these are examples where for whatever reason it was necessary to suppress. And there's that teaching in the Kabbalistic tradition, I learned this as a little child, that before you're born, a little angel just puts their finger right here, and that's why you have a little indent, and that's why you forget where you come from. It's so beautiful. We don't remember. And in a way, we're like following the trails. It's like we just woke up from an amnesia and we don't remember anything, but we're just like, okay, here are these things going on. Like, what's the evolutionary intention? What's the story here? But there can be a program where we're going to awaken or remember things. And on the other end too, there can be a program where certain events will happen, and it can actually be pretty traumatizing, and that will further our own journey in whatever way is necessary. Both of these things can be a part of it, and we can't prevent it. There's certain things that just are meant to happen.
I love that you brought up the story of Lahiri, and how do you pronounce Lahiri?
I can't say.
I always pronounce his.
I've never heard it out loud, actually.
But anyway, I just call him Lahiri. It's easier. But in the story of what happened, he's in and near the Himalayas, right? And he gets lost and doesn't know why or where he's going, and he has interfaces with Babaji. But this story is written in the autobiography of a yogi. And of course, completely surprising. We don't have his chart, but the event is very Uranian. And one of the things that happens in this story that I think is just awesome, because Uranus is an accelerant. When Uranus is transiting your chart in some way, if it's trining or conjunct, it's an accelerant. And we can swing one way or the other, depending on how we respond or react to the accelerant, but it will accelerate things in a mind-blowing way. And what he was also shown at some point, or given, I should say, gifted, because at one moment he seems like he's in this stage of evolution, and the next moment you find out who he really is, right? Like just even Eckhart on that level. And Babaji is granting him like some of his last final separating desires. Do you remember what happens there?
No, tell me.
So he's one of his desires was literally to experience royalty, like all of the foods and the beauty of the palace, and just to be inside it, just to experience it in some way. And he's given that. And in the autobiography, I believe that's the Yogananda's book where I read that, he's literally indulging in this experience. It was just this lingering desire that he had. Yeah. And it, at the time it might have felt to have lasted all day, it was a day, but maybe it was like that. It sort of comes into you, you have that experience, and then the desire for it, which creates the separation from God, no longer exists, because you've actually had the ultimate experience of what that was, which is a polarity of Uranus. It is Leo. And it's, in reading that, is actually was really helpful for me, because you never would think that somebody like that would have such a desire, right?
So he met Babaji, and Babaji created a situation for him. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Where he was literally following. Yeah, it was following when he was in the Himalayas, and he like created this other universe. he just manifested this place that only Lahiri could experience, and yet it was as real could be.
Wow.
Amazing. Wow. And what I just love about it is that, our understanding of time, being human, and how we experience time is just so different than when we're not in the form anymore.
Yeah.
And for example, he always also talks about that the soul, comes back about every 250 years is what Yogananda is talking about. For all of us, that sounds like an eternity from now. If we were to leave, there are exceptions when people leave prematurely, etc. But that's the average time that a soul. But in an experience, say like this, what Lahiri is, and I think the best way to say that desire that was unique to him, was that he was able to fill himself up by the experience to really know what that was like, to have the best of the best, whether it was, gold pillars or marble floors or the best foods and whatever it is that he could taste and partake in.
Mm.
He was completely saturated by the experience so much the desire was gone.
Mm.
And he could then be still a husband to his wife and a father to his children, although very much his whole life after that was a spiritual life. And it wasn't like he was doing daily things with his family like most might do, but he was a dedicated spiritual a spiritual saint for other people. To guide them.
Wow.
So anyway, I love that story. That's the polarity of Uranus in that story.
Mm-hmm.
In fifth
Absolutely.
house.
Yeah, let's definitely look at the transits of that.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so let's see, one more piece to speak about with just the 11th house Aquarius archetype. We spoke about, traumatic events and sudden realizations, but there can also be this piece where this very archetype that is all about liberation and awakening, we can find ourselves relative to a state of total suppression, coming to a point in our life where we flip out, we break out. And it's because we're suppressing a very powerful impersonal force. Like, our individuality is impersonal. It's impersonal to our ego construct. It's just what we are, and it's actually really powerful, and its vibration is essentially like as strong as anything else in it's intense. And so to suppress that much energy, we don't realize the dis-ease that we're creating for ourselves. And so when that suppression is met with a lot of projection, where external factors are keeping me at bay, or there's something to be afraid of, it can come to a point where a soul can flip into a sort of reckless state. There can be intense paranoia or anxiety, or just make sudden choices that actually induce more separation and disconnect as a result of being so out of touch with one's nature. And, we see this happening a lot during the traditional midlife crisis, which more or less happens early 40s for most souls, when Uranus is opposite itself. The need to find more freedom, to break out of the limiting, boring, monotonous constructs that we're familiar with. Oftentimes, metaphorically, a soul will find some things that resonate with, when they were young and strong and beautiful, and, had a lot more energy when they were in high school, and they used to love jeans and listening to the Grateful Dead and long motorcycle rides. Like, they'll reconnect with something that represents a state of freedom before they fell into a sort of monotony. But even that is not entirely the ultimate. I mean, that could be helpful, actually, but there's underneath that is the soul wanting to be free, something more essential to who we are wanting to come out at that time.
Mm-hmm. I like the example that Jeffrey used to use about the guy the multimillionaire. He's got the mansion and all these fancy cars, a banker. And at 42, he's just, all the credit cards are maxed out. He's like, he just walks away from it all. And he says to sell t-shirts on the beach in Malibu.
Nice.
Maybe he's a surfer, right? And he just wants to sell t-shirts, right? He doesn't want to wear a suit. He doesn't want any of the excess. He just wants to be close to the sea. And it's just a great example. But, a lot of people do radical things at their midlife crisis point with the Uranus opposition. Mm-hmm. I know for me, it was one of the most difficult times that I remember in my life. Mm-hmm. But what had happened, difficult on Uranus had just come across my Saturn as well. So you talk about the suppression. So It
Yeah.
was like the jackhammer to cement. It was everything that I'd ever repressed or hidden from or denied or this or that. It just seemed like my whole entire past, all my long-term memories, everything was just flooding into me. And it did create this increase in my nervous system that was just, I couldn't sleep. I never felt relaxed. There's nothing I could do to actually, mitigate it or help it. And I knew the transit that was happening. And so I do also know that when you're able to honor these changes that you must make, unless you do that, this won't stop. You have to really, and it to me, it is about not attaching to anything
Right. Right.
except for the truth of what's best. You can't attach. That's the trine to Libra. You cannot attach to anything because you are rebelling now. You are releasing. You are detaching. Um, you just attach to the truth of what's best, and it will allow you to objectify your life at that point, because you're just looking at the last 42 years or looking back and you're saying, I just want everything to be different now. Like, what can I do to change this? And I mean, obviously not everything, but something that reflects who I actually am, and nothing that reflects what weighs me down or, like you said, bores you to tears.
Mm-hmm.
you know there's nothing worse in the world than the experience of marking time.
Right.
When you've become more conscious about your life, like, I want to be all the way in every moment. I don't want to waste a minute or a moment. That can be a heavy Saturn transit. I mean, Saturn's in Aquarius right now.
Yeah.
A lot of people are feeling that. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. I don't want to waste any more time doing something I don't want to be doing.
Mm.
And so collectively, there's just a lot of radical things happening vibrationally and collectively.
That's beautiful.
A lot of rebellion.
So Uranus in the 11th house or Aquarius will also speak to group dynamics. We're going to find, and Jeff Green taught about the idea of a social contagion, certain elements opening up and liberating all around the world at the same time. And this can be a rebellion against certain status quo dynamics. It can be a sort of awakening within the collective relative to wherever there's been suppression. And it's going to happen almost, there's no singular, like it's beyond country or nation. It's going to show up everywhere in a different way according to the unique society that it's showing up in. But it's the energy that's alive. It's like the acupuncture point of the earth. It's just like opening up right now everywhere. And this is going to, within society, always highlight divisions and groups. So Uranus in the 11th house can really speak to where we're finding ourselves either identifying with what Jeff Green calls the social dinosaurs, right? I want to suppress things, keep things according to the known, or we're finding ourselves really pushing towards liberation and freedom. And because of the nature of the suppression, oftentimes this liberation and freedom comes with a lot of adversity. And this is where the trauma and so much of the anxiety and the suffering really of the 11th house can come through people just not being in a spirit of togetherness, or my group versus group. And we're seeing it so much right now in the world in terms of just different political ideologies or groups or perspectives or ways of living. And it's almost promised to happen because as we become more radicalized relative to our suppression, it's a natural step, I find, for at least a moment, create some kind of box or boundary around that which I'm trying to separate myself from. I mean, in our evolution, that's kind of what the individuated stages are about in a sense. And then in terms of our general evolutionary journey, this is a phase that we're all going through where we need to consciously differentiate between what is relevant and what is not relevant, what is true and useful and what is not. But if we make that become a me versus them or us versus them, it really does perpetuate more trauma. And so one of the deeper ongoing thresholds of Uranus in the 11th house is a humanity, a life, a world where we're elevating our thinking, we're elevating our intelligence, our political systems, our technological systems, our systems of government, of family, of relationship. Like, put any sign, anything going on there with Uranus in the 11th house. This is where we're going to constantly be pushing the opportunity to, or the calling of our own soul, rather, not so much an opportunity, but the awakening impulse to arrive at a higher vibration, a higher intelligence, and that higher intelligence is always moving towards the basic principles of harmony, giving and sharing and including. And I always like to point out with this archetype, Uranus in the 11th house or Aquarius can be a futuristic thinker. And it's going to be innovative, right? So we could have this, okay, I have an idea.
Yeah.
We have all these issues. People are being laid off on their jobs. Let's automate all of the vehicles and use drone technologies to deliver
Yeah.
everything, right? And this is a good idea in many regards, and there's a lot of good thinking. Now, every single idea is also going to have other dimensions to it, right? And I want to develop AI, and I want to make sure that we really evolve our humanity such that we honor the growing edge of artificial intelligence for its greater potential. And this will then free up more time and create more creative space, and we won't have to invest that much in the work, whatever. But of course, this can become so fringe, so out of whack, that it won't consider what are the ethical, social ramifications. I mean, for example, like, let's give one very common example: clean technology. Fossil fuels are bad for the environment. Let's go for these electronic batteries. And it's pushing for something. And of course, it's depending on what the individual perceives as innovative or evolutionary. They're going to build a box around that. And for them, that's going to be like revolutionary, and other people will join that. But there's always something beyond that that will be even more inclusive. There's always a consciousness and a technology and a scientific understanding that's just beyond that, that's even more harmonious, because even our evolved technological systems right now are absolutely devastating. The slave labor that goes into mining many of the minerals that we use for lithium ion batteries, and the environmental devastation, but no one's talking about that because there's so much financial and political interest involved that this is pretty much suppressed. And so, all the space trash that we have out there just for the sake of exploring space, but we're polluting not just our Earth, but space. So it's an important thing to recognize. We can be so gung-ho around revolution and innovation, but I think the more we're looking towards specific features and qualities, we're just creating a very narrow, the second house Taurus square, a very narrow, isolated world of thinking that seems innovative, but really is just improving upon how we've done things, but it's not quite healing the split. It's not quite bringing us together. And that's where I think, when we learn about the yugas, Sri Yukteswar writes about the different ages, and that in each age, we comprehend the laws of the universe at different capacities. So during the dark age, it's really all about force and power. And then during the electrical age, we start to comprehend the forces of magnetism and, whatever he talks about in that regard. I think as we evolve as a human species, we understand that our technological innovations are less about taking and controlling resources, and more about our understanding of who we are and the understanding of the nature of life. So it's an important thing to speak to, because that Uranus in the 11th house signature can find a soul really on both sides of that coin of, pushing beyond the confines of old, outdated systems, but then also being stuck with the limits of their own human intelligence, their arrogance, profound. Oh, look at all those stupid people eating bread. I have the new evolved diet. Oh, no, I don't step foot in car. I don't touch anything. It's almost like this this way of thinking that actually unintentionally just says, okay, me and my people, we're better than everyone else. Elitism.
Yeah.
And that's not the highest expression of this archetype.
I mean, I think Uranus in the 11th house or in Aquarius is so much at its height about leading a consensus forward, new ideas, breakthroughs in any, whether it's medical field or breakthroughs in technology. I mean, that's the height of it, the genius, right? The great idea, the innovation, these minds, these great minds that are able to lead the planet forward to a better place. And yes, clean energy, and just really what can be done when people come together and bring their heads together, so to speak, for the better of humanity. It's incredible what can be done on a human level with a strong Uranian signature. That's the upside of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like in even cures, right? For cures for diseases, things like that. I mean, somebody's come up with the right medicines or the right combination. It's just, there's just a brilliance
When a group of
about
people
some
share
people.
the same positive intention, the potential is beyond this
Oh
world.
yeah,
It's amazing.
totally.
Yeah. And they come together in the right way. It's beautiful.
The perfect segue for our first chart.
Let's do it. Okay.
Oh, that is perfect. Okay.
All right. So here we are. Here's the beautiful image. Wow. Oh, wow. Look at those eyes. Okay.
Mhm.
I love how that depicts sort of like also like the fracturing quality of Uranus.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. There's actually one other picture I wanted you to put in here for a specific reason, but
Oh,
I'll just describe it. There's a picture I sent Ari that has Damar Hamlin with crosses on his cheeks. They sometimes they'll put the black makeup or whatever it is under their eyes to reflect the lights or the sun or whatever, but he puts
that's how they do it.
crosses on his cheeks. And on Sunday night, the Buffalo Bills were playing the Cincinnati Bengals. And it was about 8 minutes into the first quarter, like, I don't know, 6+ minutes left in the first quarter. It's a very intense game. They're both doing very well in their conference, and super big rival kind of game. Very exciting, very charged crowd. And Damar Hamlin, he's a safety, a defensive player, was in and tackling one of the offensive players for Cincinnati. It was, I mean, as football is, it's always intense, but it wasn't like a helmet to helmet thing or anything really like, oh my gosh, when you see it. And they both came to the ground, and Damar Hamlin stood up. He took a few steps, and then he just collapsed like that. And he was unconscious and he wasn't moving. And so, of course, the first responders, they rushed onto the field, and they immediately started giving him or trying to resuscitate him. CPR, and I think the defibrillator was used. It was hard to tell because all the players were surrounding him. And immediately, it wasn't long, immediately, these grown men are sobbing. They're thinking, oh my God, he's going to die. And never in anybody's experience in history has something quite like this happened, where an ambulance is literally on the field like that. Usually they're carrying him off in a stretcher, etc. Anyway, what happened was he experienced this very specific blow. It's above the heart at a certain time within the heart's rhythm, the EKG rhythm. And they call it, I should remember, the T wave, part of the T wave. And this is when the ventricles are emptying. They're trying to repolarize electrically. It's like a 0.4 nanosecond that you have to hit the heart at this point in time. And it's so rare that only 20 to 30 people die in a year from this. And it's only usually in young people who are playing sports. Like a baseball player, like a ball gets thrown to into the chest here, right at the right point. And or a hockey puck comes here. They've even talked about a soccer ball having the same effect. Anyway, it was just devastating to watch. And I was watching the game.
You watched it
I
live?
was just like, oh, I was watching the whole thing happen. I watched it happen.
Wow.
And I was just holding my breath, waiting, assuming, oh my gosh, this guy, there's no way this, what is happening? Of course, everyone doesn't know what happened, why, he had a cardiac arrest, ultimately. Most people don't survive cardiac arrests because they happen in your home or something's happening. You don't have the right people there to respond right away. And so what happens is everything stops. And then you've got to get the blood to the organs, especially to the brain, which is such a Uranian thing, right? To the brain. So it doesn't, if it loses oxygen, it's going to die. There's going to be a neurological impact. So we think about the brain, we think of Uranus, 11th house, etc. Now I want to share here that this is a noon chart, not the correct birth time. I frankly think he's probably got a 5th house Pluto, and I'll tell you why here in a minute, but it doesn't matter. I don't have his time. I hope someday I get his time. Today I just found out that he's finally woken up. Now what happens is, this is called a Commodio cordis. There's some name for this rare event or medical trauma that happens that is, again, so rare that this is what they're thinking happens. He has no history of heart disease. No, and when you're a professional athlete, especially a football player, if you have any issues with your heart, you're not going to be able to play the sport, right? So anybody, you can have no issues with heart disease or anything, and this could happen to you if this was hit at the right place at that exact moment. So you see the sun being the ruler for Leo, conjunct Uranus here. Even Jupiter and Mars are conjunct in Aquarius. Sun conjunct Uranus in Aquarius. And so this is sudden impact, this sudden event, and something very unusual and very unique. At that time, Mars is retrograde in Gemini. It was essentially exactly squaring his nodal axis.
Where's Mars? Right here.
Mars is squaring, yes, his nodal axis. But we also have the transiting nodes in a square to his natal Uranus. Mercury is retrograde on his Venus, which is all about his survival. And again, I definitely don't think he has a Taurus rising, because if you look at him, I don't know, there's a look about a Taurus rising that, again, this is not the correct birth time. But we can still look at the archetypes themselves to see what's happening here. Now, another thing that really struck me, of course, he has these crosses on his face all the time with the charcoal or whatever they use to block out the light. And the South Node in Pisces is, his connection to God, in this case, Jesus. He's putting crosses on his cheeks. And
I'm going to pull up the chart while you're speaking, okay?
Yeah, the picture, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. The prayers, the outpouring of prayer that has gone out in this country is just unbelievable. Athletes across sports, all different sports. I mean, it's just an incredible thing, like you said, how people come together. There's so much power in prayer and just directing your thoughts with a pure intention. I mean, there's been studies done about how it can really facilitate healing. And another thing I wanted to share, there you go. Yeah, you can just leave that there, because I remember this. I was reading a bit about his life. He grew up in a suburb of Pittsburgh, in a small town of 6,000 people. 30% of the people that live in his town are below the poverty line. And he talked about 2 years ago, he's only 24 years old. 2 years ago, when he got into the NFL, was during COVID. And just before Christmas, he decided to start like a foundation, because he had just, been drafted and all this. The NFL, his mom runs a daycare center. So of course she works with a lot of children that are quite poor. And his foundation involves, toys, giving toys to those children who don't have anything, and to give back to his community in this way. And so he started this foundation, and it's a GoFundMe.
Oh, he just froze.
You want to get his
Okay, we had a little interruption, so I'm going to share that screen.
that picture.
Yeah.
And just after you show it for a bit, we can just go back to the chart. But okay. So the South Node in Pisces here, he's got Neptune in Capricorn, which Pluto's 1 degree away from. And so I was just speaking about his desire to give back and to his community, and just the outpouring of prayer and people coming together, sending him good energy. And as a result, the people that don't know him and want to be a positive part of his journey and what's happening are giving, are donating to this foundation to give children what they can't have otherwise, which is prior to Christmas, of course, a Merry Christmas, but really just supporting young people in general. And so, again, you can see that this is a north node in the fifth in this chart, but we don't have the exact placement of the planets, but the sun is a natural ruler of the fifth and very close to Uranus. So really just being a change maker for people's lives, for young people's lives. And there's a wonderful video of him showing up at this daycare with all these gifts for these children. It just like melted my heart. So for a young soul, relatively young in the sport, I mean, to already just immediately, they were saying, or he was saying, well, all the other guys are working on their 40-yard dash time. I've got to figure out how to, go shopping. He's wrapping the presents and getting some of his friends together to help support this cause. He said, when he was growing up, he didn't have a role model like, some people do. And he just wanted to come back and be that for these young people, which was just incredible. So the question becomes, really, why did this happen to this soul? And without a birth time, we can't really maybe get too far into it, but we always think of Pisces as an archetype in this context. It does put it in the 11th here, but being a self-sacrifice for a greater cause. And already we know that the whole entire country is well aware of this foundation to help children, so that's already been a benefit.
Yeah.
But I think it's really about the sport. And while this wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a helmet to helmet or some crazy thing that happened in terms of, the NFL shouldn't allow certain things to happen. It would just happen to be that very rare, unique thing, but it feels fated. It feels like you said pre-programmed almost, that we're not aware of. That's the nature of Uranus. It's the planet of the unexpected. So the last 4 days, I have been checking nonstop on my computer to find out how he is, right? Me, millions of people are doing that. And just this morning, apparently, I think he did wake up last night. I wanted to mention all my, I say past life, but in my 20s, I was very into the medical field. That was my life before this life. And I spent a lot of time standing in surgeries, even heart surgeries. But that was my work. My job was working with surgeons in this way. But what they do is they sedate the patient and they cool the patient down so they can get the vitals back and stabilize them, but also so the brain can recover. So they know the first 24 to 48 hours is you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what if any of the loss of oxygen was going to affect the brain capacity. And they did find that he is still neurologically intact, thank God. And he just woke up. He's moving his feet and his hands. And guess what the first question he had was?
Well, I know. I Googled him after.
Who won the game?
Yeah.
And the doctor said, you did. You won the game of life. So I will say too that I am a sports fan. I love sports, but it's about perspective. There's multiple things. I'm sure that this event and incident, it's affected so many people who are watching or heard about it after. You're just feeling for the family. You're feeling for his brother. You're feeling for his mother. You're feeling for his father. You're feeling for all these people. It's a perspective changer. That's what Uranus does. It shocks you into a perspective change where, you've been just fixated on something over here that is just so not important in the scheme of things. An event like this, a total stranger that you may not know, but it has a way of shocking you out of a certain perspective and saying, oh my gosh, I just need to be present for my family, for my children, or whatever it might be. So the timing of this particular show today was really perfect, especially because there's good news here and he will survive. We don't know yet, or they don't know with the long-term effects of what happened. I'm sure he'll never play football again. I shouldn't say never. I never know these things, but maybe that'll shock us too. I think it'll probably kill him not to be able to if he can't. I'm sure he will coach children. in sports, and he will also talk to them about, you know, you never know when you'll not, when this, you won't be able to play the game you love anymore. You never know when your time
Sometimes
is.
Sun Uranus, and I see this happen a lot, will speak to a soul where their entire lifetime will manifest as very powerful, sudden, essential shifts in terms of life purpose and direction. Ram Dass is a Sun Uranus soul. I've seen that as an, just these moments to just totally radically alter the course of their life. I mean, Sun is our core integration point, and so to have Uranus with a Sun is like, all right, I guess I am a whole new story of why I'm here. It's a very common experience that I've observed.
I mean, but look at Jupiter and Mars in Aquarius too. I mean, this is like a teacher for a teacher through his trauma,
And
right?
Saturn's going to be moving over that soon.
Oh, Saturn will be, and Pluto will come over as Neptune. So, it is really right there already. I'm wondering about that. I think, really, really, what this is going to do for him and his family. I mean, being so great, there's the gratitude that they feel, the outpouring of love that they've experienced. I mean, I think a big part of these transits, just the reality for him of how people showed up, or where their thoughts were. I mean, I think that's part of it, but unfortunately, obviously, what this means, I mean, his team's definitely going to the playoffs and all of that, which he will not
Did
be
they
a part
win?
of. Well, they didn't. Oh, that's the other thing. I think this might be the first time ever they stopped the game. Everybody was sobbing, both teams. I mean, the guy that he actually came into contact with, thought he was responsible for this happening. And he wasn't. It was, and even the announcers were like, gosh, I didn't seem like that big of a hit, because he literally came to the ground, stood up, took 2 steps, and then collapsed. So, there was something else going on. I knew immediately something else is going on, like that you don't stand up and take a few steps after a hard hit. You're still right. You stay on the ground when you've been knocked out that way. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it's the first time I think they've ever just stopped the game, and it's been incredible. Maybe they'll just call it a tie. Both teams have a really amazing record. So they're both going to go into the playoffs, and for a soul like his, that is really important to him. It's his team, that's his life, that's his community, that's his tribe. So anyway, I think if you're listening, the last thing I'll say about transits here, you've got Mars, which rules his Saturn and Aries, trining his Uranus. So when I saw that on Sunday night, when I, of course, brought up the chart, I'm like, okay, that's a survival. I mean, that is like, he's got the rare, chance to just, getting there on time, right on time, the right people there, the right things happening, the right hands on him, Mars and Gemini, the right hands working on him. That I think he's gonna pull through this. I mean, I can't imagine he wouldn't, with what I'm seeing here. That's the optimistic in me. But he also has transiting Neptune sextiling his Venus, which is the planet of our survival, is Venus. And so I was quite hopeful for that. So anyway, here's a chart of somebody who, like you said, these sudden events, pre-programmed for sure, wake up call to the world, to others, to athletes, to humans in general, to stop what you're doing and take a little longer to be grateful, to love the ones you're with.
I guess because so many people follow this sport, I imagine the impact. I mean,
totally,
I'm
yeah,
getting it from you, which is like, this is significant. And I'll just say one thing that I noticed. So, the south node of Neptune right here is at 11 degrees Aquarius. The nodes were exactly squaring that south node of Neptune. Again, so that just further emphasizes the collective symbolism. And this is having an impact on the collective in a significant way. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to this next chart. We have Steve Jobs. This is a really great chart example. He has Uranus in Cancer in the 11th house. His Uranus also rules his Chiron and Mercury in Aquarius in the 5th house. him and Steve Wapniak, they basically were the ones who put together the first personal computer type situation in, I guess, in the 70s or something, like before people owned computers.
Yeah.
He revolutionized the whole idea of owning a personal computer, bringing out into the world. The impact that he's had on, think about it this way, it's Uranus in Cancer in the 11th house. Everyone has a computer in their home. And even more so, everyone carries a computer with them
On their
all the
phone,
time.
right there.
And the first Macintosh computer, or one of the first, I forgot, that he marketed, he called Lisa after
Hmm.
his first daughter, Lisa.
Aw, I didn't know that.
Um, what's interesting though is there's a lot of symbology in that. The whole personal computer world, eh, while it allows for, 11th house Cancer, people to connect from all different places of the world, finding your own tribe, finding your people. Doesn't matter whether it's people you grew up with. There's a sort of inclusivity and building of community that happens through that. I mean, the whole idea of the internet and the networks that we're able to access through computers and these technologies. And there's also a trauma of profound dissociation and disconnect from the emotional body. We just see
Mhm.
that people are hanging out with each other on their phones. Computers are
Mhm.
screens that we're looking at. It's devoid of actual human connection and affection and intimacy.
Yeah.
And so the trauma of his own life, the traumas in his own life also reflect this. His daughter came forth from a relationship he was in with I think her name was Barbara Brennan, and they weren't married, and he denied that he was the father of this child for many years, and was very degrading towards his daughter's mother. Later on in life, he acknowledged that he is the father, and later on, he included her more actively in his life and shared his last name with her. But this is almost like the dimension of his life that people don't talk about or celebrate. They celebrate the technological innovation, what he's brought forth into the world, the contributions that he's made, and yet his first computer was named after his daughter that he wouldn't even acknowledge was a part of his family for
Oh,
several years. And so there's some sort of symbolism in that alone that I think is really meaningful, really useful to acknowledge. There's a really great talk, and maybe I'll post it in the comments, so check it out. It's one of the best talks I've heard when I was researching Steve Jobs. In my training course, I use Steve Jobs' chart to exemplify planets that square the nodes. So we have a whole class on his moon. It's fascinating. So I did a lot of research on him. This person, Barbara, she spoke out at some point and gave a talk at Google, really about the consequences of valuing technological innovation. And
mhm.
she's a deeply spiritual soul. I would say Steve Jobs himself was sort of in transition, beginning of the spiritual stages. Really highlight, I mean, I would say just definitely in transition, not quite in, because he was very much identified with his own genius and intelligence and typical third individuated, um, but very much had some strong spiritual orientations that he was integrating. Barbara Brennan is just a deeply humble spiritual soul, an artist. I couldn't find where she is. She's just clearly not on the radar right now. But the talk that she gives to me also really highlights a lot of the trauma that comes with all of these technological innovations, the impact that it has on us, and how we are ignoring that. She even speaks the idea of technologies that are made without compassion. When compassion and care is not included in our innovative work, it has a really profound impact. So I find that to
Yeah.
be a useful example.
I had no idea about that. I'm so happy you shared that story about naming his first computer after her. And for sure that moon squaring the
While
node.
denying, I think it was while still denying that she was his daughter. I think.
Oh,
I
wow.
have to check that. I have to check that, I think, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Mhm. Great one.
All right. So Osho.
We'll make this one quick.
Okay. Well, I just want to highlight here, Uranus and Aries in the 11th house, one of the core, and squaring the Saturn in Capricorn in the 8th. In fact, the Pluto as well. This highlights the whole 8th house, 2nd house, 11th house dynamic. He created a community. He had an awakening. He's a second stage spiritual soul and was definitely deluded with his own power. And there's a lot of corrupt use of his own power, money, wealth, sexuality. And we can see these dynamics very clearly in his chart. And the community that he created had a very traumatizing effect. What's interesting is there was a desire to impact the political reality in the town that he was living in. I think it was like the Dales in Oregon.
Right.
So Uranus and Aries in the 11th house. It's not just you are an outlier. You and your community, you're like you don't fit in. Like you're doing your own thing, and it's like Aries 11th house. Like, hey guys, like be a little more considerate. There's a sort of selfishness and exclusiveness that was manifest there, and I think there's a lot of traumatic impacts, and of course things that happened that weren't very good, and corrupt issues manifested with the people that were working with him, which led to the total, deconstruction of the entire community and ultimately his demise as the guru figure and whatnot. But this is just a great example where his practices and his teaching, there's many ways, there are many revolutionary elements. I know a lot of people that practice or draw upon many of the things that he brought forward. He was a leader. He was revolutionary in things that he introduced, but there being a sort of elitism and better than kind of consciousness mixed in with a whole lot of unresolved desire, which is what makes this stage of evolution particularly dangerous, and you got to be careful.
Oh, right. I mean, this is such it's a perfect example of what can happen in this stage, right? Getting kind of drunk on your own capacities and taking things too far. But one thing I noticed too, I mean, we've got Jupiter's ruling all those Sag planets, right? It's the Sun, Mars, Mercury, Venus. Venus and Mercury are balsamic here, and Venus rules his south node. I mean, there's just a lot of these culminating energies, but Jupiter, Moon, and Leo is so grand. It's so big. They're so magnetic. It's so magnetic. His ability the magnetism that he must have had to draw in a community like this and to convince them that what he was experiencing was actually true. See, of course he had a certain capacity, but he got discovered when someone overheard him saying, "I'm so sick and tired of pretending." Pretending I have this or that capacity. So he did have capacity, but he was pretending he had far more than he did, which is what can happen at that second stage spiritual, depending on how any soul responds to that. And so you can see with Jupiter ruling so many things in his chart, including his 7th house, which is his house of relationships to everybody, and the ruler, and Mars being the ruler of Uranus and Aries retrograde in the 11th, Jupiter and the moon are in conjunct Saturn in the 8th. So this is the lie. This is the lie.
He has that Venus Mercury squaring the nodes as well.
Exactly. So that and Neptune, right? He's hiding behind the truth. Neptune is squaring his sun in Sagittarius. So
I should use this chart next year in my course, because this is a really good example with some core really good EA themes, just like the Pluto, Saturn, and the Sag square and the nodes. Yeah. Okay. Joni.
Yeah, Joni girl.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I love this person. So she has Uranus in 11th house. This Uranus trines the south node. It's a ruler of the south node. North node of Leo conjunct Pluto. She has Scorpio 5th house square in the nodal axis as well. This is a soul that is profoundly creative. It's like our whole purpose in life is to create. That's like why she came here.
Yeah.
And looking at this Uranus in Gemini in the 11th house retrograde, mind you, it's ruled by Mercury, which squares the nodes. This soul, the way she thinks, the way she categorizes life she was beating to her own drum. she saw, I mean, one of her lyrics, looking at the clouds, what is it? I can see from both sides now.
Oh, yeah.
It's standing apart from the mainstream of thinking and looking from a fresh, clear, liberated perspective. Her lyrics, her words are really pointing to the trauma of how we're living, what we've done to each other, what we've done to our mind. She speaks out against, or not against, or just points out the temptation of lust and sex and money and environmental devastation and the corruption, the greed of religions. And there's also this beautiful poetry that, you know, for me, when I not just listen to her, but also when I hear her voice, and just the brilliance of her own creative expression, there's something that's so out of the box.
Yeah.
Now, this soul also, uh, she, her journey was, she was a very fascinating story of that Scorpio stuff. She had a daughter, and at that time, you're single, you have a daughter. It just, in Canada, the society wasn't supportive, or it wasn't very viable or possible for her to raise this daughter single on her own. And so she really wasn't able to keep her.
Mm.
And that, of course, brought forth a lot of grief. And she had to deal with being very different, having her own unique talents, her unique voice, her skills, in a world where she didn't fit into any kind of boxes. And she became successful as a musician just by being herself. I wouldn't even say there was like a strong ambition even to become something. This was really about her feeling a deep call within her own soul to just focus entirely on creation. And that's clearly what that Scorpio, she just needs to create, needs to constantly move all of this energy and constantly create. But a lot of the stories were around business partnership, people that are working with her, you know, Aquarius 8th house, that had unclean motives. And sort of the distaste with humanity and the whole, you know, being famous world and working with different producers and people that are trying to take something. She really had to maintain her own individuality and not be afraid to be herself, not give in to the corruption, not give in to all the temptations that were there, to really be true to herself. And I think we see that with Uranus and Gemini in the 11th house, standing sort of on the outside her entire life, while focusing on that Leo 2nd house. I'm going to do what I'm doing for myself because I enjoy it. I'm not going to give in to trying to fit into something, following the dangling carrot, or being a part of some sort of community that will appreciate me or want me. I'm going to be myself. And really what's happened as the result of that is she is one of the most beloved, honored, appreciated artists out there because of who she is.
Yeah,
And the
I mean,
immense impact of her art.
she can reach anyone, any
Mm-hmm.
walk of life with her lyrics. She's so relatable. And, you know, she talks so much about her own story in a lot of her songs. I mean, my favorite song of hers, I love so many, but By a Mile, is Case of You. And she says, just before our love got lost, you said, I am as constant as a northern star. And I said, constantly in the darkness, where's that at? If you want me, I'll be in the bar. And you see her Saturn with Mars balsamic in the 12th.
Wow.
And you've got, well, Neptune is conjunct Venus and Virgo, right? She says, on the back of a cartoon coaster in the blue TV screen light, I drew a map of Canada. Oh, Canada, with your face sketched on it twice. And she says, oh, you're in my blood like holy wine. You taste so bitter and so sweet. I could drink a case of you, darling, and I would still be on my feet. So when she's talking about, you know, this, I think the heartbreak of love, I mean, have that 12th house, that Piscean like dream, and then just um of course using the wine and the bar, the other 12th house analogy there, and still being on her feet. It's so 12th house, it's so Pisces with Neptune conjunct Venus. But so there is this fantasy side of her, the dream side of her, but then this heartbreaking energy within it. And she says, I'm a lonely painter, I live in a box of paints. I'm frightened by the devil, and I'm drawn to those ones that ain't afraid.
Mm.
And you talked about her feeling so alone, or so alone in her creations. I mean, that's where she keeps company, I
She
think,
would say that she would alternate between painting and music. And just like what she did with how she played guitar, she didn't follow any kind of conventional tuning or hand play. She figured it all out on her own. Gemini, 11th house. I'm not following the rules of how I'm supposed to coordinate my hand, how I'm supposed to think about this, how she used words and lyrics and rhyme.
Yeah.
Everything about her expression was she was not she was thinking for herself in every way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that. And just, there's no sound like what Joni Mitchell has created.
Yeah. I have to say one more little bit on this song in terms of this is the line, these are the lines now that people can relate to. She said, I met a woman, she had a mouth like yours. She knew your life. She knew your devils and your deeds. And she said, go to him, stay with him if you can, but be prepared to bleed.
Whoa.
It's just like, too, that there's this element of not seeing people clearly and wanting the dream and falling in love. And it's so romantic. And then the way that she just weaves in reality, that just pierces that veil of illusion because she's been there, she's lived it. But you're right. She's so poetic with her lyrics. I mean, so she doesn't have the way she uses words and how she rhymes can reach you so south node in the 8th so quickly, deeply, Uranus in the 11th, but so quickly and deeply with south node in the 8th. You're like, you can feel it in your soul when she sings and when she says what she does.
Yep.
She's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. So this was an amazing show, amazing hour plus, I think, with you. And we've got one more to go next month, I think it is. We'll be looking at Uranus and Pisces for the 12th house. And thank you for being on this journey with me, Ari. And see, we're going to have to figure out another planet after this series closes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
See what else is out there.
Have we covered them all? No, but this is a fantastic hour and a half together.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Till next time. Namaste.